Chapter 14, beginning in verse 1, Mark writes, "Now the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and teachers of the law were looking for some sly way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or the people may riot. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, 'Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor.' And they rebuked her harshly. 'Leave her alone,' said Jesus. 'Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will have always with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the gospel is proclaimed or preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her.' Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money, so he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, 'Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?' So he sent 2 of his disciples, telling them, 'Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, the teacher asks, "Where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?" He will show you a large upper room furnished, and ready. Make preparation for us there.' The disciples left, went into the city, and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining on the table eating, he said, 'I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me.' They were saddened, and one by one they said to him, 'Surely not I.' 'It is one of the 12, he replied, "one who dips bread into his bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as is written about him. But woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." While they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it. This is my body." Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it to them, and they all drank from it. "This is the blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many," he said to them. "I tell you the truth, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Interestingly, as we get to the final week of Jesus, the decision by the gospel writers is to record not one, but 2 different dinners that Jesus partakes in. Now, by dinner, I mean the late meal or the big meal. And I know there's always argument over when dinner is, whether that's lunch or whether that's supper. And in this case, we're talking about probably supper in both nights, since both meals take place at night. There we go. We're done with the semantics of the word dinner. All right? But have you ever thought about the idea of both of these dinners are done by a group that's traveling? You ever done dinner while you're traveling? You got a couple of options. You can do the pack and go route, which is that fun part where you throw stuff in the cooler or in the sack, and then you have the ability just to grab the sandwiches as you go. For me, that generally would indicate bottled water, since my little issue with dehydration a few years ago. My mother is always concerned that I have enough water with me when I'm traveling. And it's generally tortillas, because those don't go bad no matter how many times the car gets cold from the air conditioning and then gets hot when I'm not in it. And some peanut butter. So you can slap some peanut butter on a tortilla, and the car's been warm enough, the tortilla is already like you've heated it, it's a wonderful little sandwich. So there's pack and go. Or there's the one that I do more often when I travel, honestly, probably the one you do more often. There's grab and go, and that can be from the convenience stores of Speedway or the Golden Arches of McDonald's. The ability to end up with that pile of trash in the passenger seat, or if you've got a passenger with you, they really don't like you just to throw your sandwich wrappers at them. Or there's finally what Jesus is doing. There's that point where you get to sit down and enjoy a meal in the company of others. Now, last year's vacation through those many states had all three of those. There was the peanut butter. There was the grab and go at such diverse places as McDonald's. And there was another McDonald's. And actually there was a Long John Silver's in Tampa Bay, or Sarasota, or one of those towns there on the Gulf Coast. But by the time I got to Corinth, Texas, north of Dallas, and spent the evening with my cousin Mike, also known as Big Mike. I was Little Mike because he's 10 years older than me. And when he was 10 years older than me in 1982, graduating high school, I was about as thin as a beanpole could possibly be. Believe it or not, there was a point in time when I made Emmerich look like a heavyweight. And those years clearly, those days are clearly gone. But Mike said to me, he said, "Hey, I know you're going to Arlington tonight, but tomorrow Mom wants us to go to breakfast." I'm like, okay. And it's going to be a memorable time for you because you're going to get to finally meet my son. My cousin Big Mike's now got a son who will soon be turning 18. And since they live in Texas and I don't live in Texas, it's my first chance to meet him. So this is going to be one of those meals where we gather around. So we start to talk about it. We go to pick my Aunt Carolyn with her sweet Texas accent up. "Michael, it's good to see you." I'm Michael, her son is Mike. And I probably butchered her accent really bad there. And she said to Mike, she said, "Let's go to Ham and Egg." And I thought, well, this sounds like we're going to a really quality place. They thought real hard about where they named this breakfast restaurant. Ooh, Ham and Egg. Well, there you go. And they started telling me about this restaurant. Now she said, "You want to be careful what you order here, because it's determined by the lady who started this restaurant 20 years ago that no one would ever leave her restaurant hungry." And I thought, okay, all right, that's hilarious, but I don't know that I've ever left a restaurant where I wasn't somewhat hungry. And I know you're going to tell me we're in Texas, so everything's bigger in Texas. But they warned me, and I listened to some of the warning. So when my 3-egg omelet, which was the only size omelet you could get, with the side of bacon, had a choice of pancakes. I was told they were the size of a plate, and I thought, no, I don't want a plate-size pancake. Or there was toast. I said, I'll take the toast. Because I had been warned of the biscuit. Now this is the size of the biscuit. That, by the way, is half of the biscuit, because as I posted this on Facebook, that little bowl on Mike's plate was the sausage gravy that he added to his meal with the biscuit. And as I posted, Mike didn't finish or clean his plate. That biscuit is literally the size of his hand, if not the size of his head. There's no way I'll ever forget eating at Ham and Egg in Lewisville, Texas. Not just because I got to meet my second cousin for the first time. Not just because I got to meet with my family again, but for nothing else. That is the largest biscuit I have literally ever seen in my life. I think that little crumb section in the bottom, I think I ate a bite of that after I took the picture. And I'll tell you this, it was not near as dry as you might think a biscuit that large must definitely be. Meals have the ability to become meaningful times to spend together. It was a meaningful dinner to regroup. And I think one of the reasons why the gospel writers include this night in Bethany, and definitely this final Passover meal, is because they're both meaningful events. I wish the disciples had given us more information. We speculate on who the woman is who comes in and breaks open her bottle of perfume, anointing Jesus. Whoever it is, to her, Jesus is very meaningful. There are suggestions. One is that it's the same woman who had been had the 7 demons cast out, that had already anointed Jesus once before with her tears and dried his feet with her hair. That's a possibility. Another option is we're in Bethany. So it's likely that it's Mary, the sister of Lazarus, who, because of her understanding of what Jesus said, when he said that I am the resurrection and the life, when he raised her brother, and understood that he was proclaiming and planning and understanding that the road to resurrection for him was soon going to lead to the cross. I think it's her. I do. I think that she took from her mantle not just perfume. It's not like she used her M-Perks and went down to Meijer and bought a bottle of perfume. She didn't call her Avon lady like my mother would and say, I need some Timeless because Jesus is eternal. She took, thank you, she took the perfume that for her would be her dowry if she were ever to get married. And it would be for her what would become her lifeline if she were to find what had just happened a few weeks previously. If she found her and Martha living as spinster sisters with no Lazarus to take care of her. There's a reason why this perfume is at such a great value. The kind of value that more than likely it's Judas adding up, thinking of all the things that we could have done if we had just sold that money. Or sold that perfume. What we could have done with all that money. Also, probably the reason he calculated it was because we learned later that as the treasurer, Judas had been known to sneak a little of the money out of the treasury into his own pocket. But this large value for her, this moment in time in Bethany, is her big biscuit moment. It's her big moment of faith where she does something that no one will ever forget. This memorable moment, which we'll talk about in a moment. But it's also this meaningful moment. It's this moment which she says, this is how valuable Jesus is to me. I want to prepare him for his death. And the event that comes next is the Passover. This is the most memorable moment in the life of a Jewish person when it comes to celebrations and events. The moment in which we celebrate the Exodus from Egypt, the grand moment of the beginning of the nation of Israel, the moment of God's gracious deliverance of the people from the tyranny and the slavery of Egypt, and the moment in which God was faithful in passing over the houses of those Israelites who were faithful to put the hyssop and the blood on top of their door paths so that their firstborn sons were not lost the same way that the Egyptians lost when the angel of death came through the land. And Jesus himself knew that this wasn't just any celebration of that great event. Luke tells us that Jesus said this at that meal. When the hour came, Jesus and his apostles reclined at the table. And he said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. Jesus said, this isn't just any Passover. This is the one. This is the one I have been waiting for. These meaningful dinners become memorable dinners. There are moments in time that cannot be forgotten. You know why the biscuits are so big at Ham and Egg in Louisville, Texas, right off of I-35? Because the lady who opened the restaurant was a military brat. And in 1942, she found herself as a civilian prisoner of war in the Philippines in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, where she spent 3 years as a prisoner of war until the liberation of the Philippine Islands by MacArthur. Her experience as a POW, Her experience of starving in that camp is why she said to herself, someday I'm going to open a restaurant and no one, not even Mike Riggs, is ever going to leave this restaurant hungry. We're going to make biscuits the size of somebody's head because it's cheap and it's filling, and there's no way anybody can ever walk out of here saying they did not feed us enough. Her memory of that event gets tied into what she does. And these two events, these two dinners become memorable. Jesus says, the sacrifice of the woman who loved me so much that she would give her last dime, her last hope of independence. She would be willing to give it all. It will be a story that will be told everywhere that the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of Jesus, is proclaimed. That's a pretty big event. This is the only thing that Jesus says will be tied into the gospel, is this event of this woman. It's a memorable moment in Bethany. And then the Passover, just as memorable. In fact, the Apostle Paul said this, for whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. The way that biscuit is a reminder of the survival and the spirit of survival that came out of a prison of war camp. The way in which that bottle being opened is a sign of someone who's put their complete hope and trust in the death of Jesus Christ. When we gather at communion, we understand that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Passover, the hope of the promise of Jeremiah that there's coming a day in which there is a new covenant which God himself will establish with mankind that mankind cannot break because it's dependent upon who God is. And it will be honored and memorialized with this piece of bread and this cup. This dinner becomes memorable because it becomes celebrated not just once a year to remember an event that happened in Egypt, but it becomes an event that can be celebrated, as Jesus said, when you remember. Do this in remembrance of me, he said. Paul said, as often as you do it. We know the early church celebrated it at least on the first day of the week when they gathered together. And there is some discussion when you look at Acts chapter 2 of whether or not they had communion anytime they gathered together. Whether the breaking of bread is the breaking of biscuits or whether it's the breaking of the celebration of the memory of what Jesus did. One dinner is hope in the death. The other dinner is the proclamation of the meaning of the death. What Jesus will do is not just give one person hope, but he'll give the entire world hope. Because the second dinner is not just a memorable dinner. It's not just a meaningful dinner. It's a message dinner. Jesus explains and takes apart the meaning of the Passover and how it's fulfilled in the Messiah. But he also said this little thing at the end. I tell you the truth, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God. This dinner has hope because it's not just representing the covenant that comes in the death. It's also representing the hope that comes when the road reaches the resurrection. It gives the hope that we have more to look forward to. For some odd reason, and this is, once again, my bizarreness when I read this, I had Dale Evans and Roy Rogers singing this text to me. Jesus says, I won't do this until we eat again. Until we eat. No, nobody else hears them singing that song. There's the hope that this is not the end, that there is more to what will be accomplished, that there is an eternal celebration of this meal. I'll tell you what, though. It's been 2 millennium since this meal was established. And the truth is, the story of the woman breaking her jar has been shared around the world because the gospel has been proclaimed, and many have restored or returned their relationship to God as a result of responding to the gospel. Which means we're going to need a bigger table than this first dinner had. We may need someone like the lady who opened a restaurant in Texas to make the unleavened bread, because we're going to need a little bit more than they had on that first dinner. We may need unleavened bread the size of your head and the size of your fist, just to take care of just a few of those who have responded to the message. I wonder how many unleavened breads it's going to take at that time when we meet and gather together again. And the truth is that Jesus himself wishes that none should ever go hungry. The invitation to his dinner is one that is available for all, because Jesus knows that what he came to do is to relieve people from a prison camp of sin that they find themselves entangled in. He offers hope for the hungry. In fact, Jesus said of his body that he who eats of it would never hunger again. He said that he was the one who had the living water, that those who drank of it would never thirst again. And his invitation to the church at Laodicea is an invitation to all who may hear. As he says in Revelation 3:20, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I have more than a picnic lunch. It's more than pack and go. I have more than a bag of sandwiches that we can grab and go. But I have the ability to come in and eat with him and he with me." We look at the memorableness of these meals. We look at the meaningfulness of these dinners. And through them we proclaim the message of the hope of the gospel. That there is a day in which Jesus offers to dine with all who will hear him and invite them in. Maybe today, that's what you need. Maybe today you hear Jesus knocking and you wish to respond and open the door. Waiting for the day in which this covenant reaches its fulfillment and we proclaim no longer his death until he returns, because Jesus has come back for us. And you will be able to be at that dinner table, which I promise you will be extremely meaningful and extremely memorable. And it will be the fulfillment of the message in which the woman put her hope. It will be the fulfillment of the new covenant which God has promised. And it will be taking Jesus at his word, that if we invite him into our lives, he will dine with us. If this morning anyone needs to make that decision, we invite you as the worship team comes to lead us in our song of invitation. Let's stand for our invitation this morning.